Now, I think one of the biggest things that we can do when we start even thinking about this stuff is to acknowledge that we don't know everything. So for tutors, that's really important to say, actually, I don't know. I haven't had that experience, or I haven't been discriminated against in that particular way. I have not thought, what racism might have done to some of my students. What does it look like? I don't know, because I haven't experienced it. What does it look like for my students when they think, actually, my race is going against me in this particular interaction? What does that look like? What does that feel like? What does it feel like when you've had that happen to you over and over again? What do microaggressions look like? What happens as a tutor when, if I confuse two people that are from the same race or ethnicity, I confuse their names. Well, what happens to those students when they think, actually, that's not me, that's the other student from the same ethnicity? What happens when we think a particular kind of student is being disruptive in class, and we keep on thinking that, and we keep on reiterating that to that student? Oh, you're the disruptive one, you need to go to the headship team or whatever. So what are we doing as tutors when we practice? Actually, we do certain things that might make other people, make some of our students feel othered or marginalized. If we don't have that experience ourselves, the first thing could be anxiety that we feel if we have to talk about this stuff, because it's like, well, how can I talk about race if I haven't experienced racism? How can I talk about this when I don't know what I'm talking about, in a sense? So the first thing I think for tutors to do is to acknowledge that we don't know everything. We don't have to know everything either. So it's information gathering that we're trying to do. The second thing is to actually, you can acknowledge to your students that you don't necessarily know everything about racism or discrimination, but that this is something that you think is very important to talk about, is very important to create safe spaces, friendly spaces where people are able to talk about this stuff. Some of your students will do it in the classroom, but others might not feel comfortable doing that, and they might come to you later, and they might have a chat with you later because you've created the space. So different students will do it differently, and we have to allow that. We have to allow that kind of diversity even in the way that students respond. So what can we do as tutors? As tutors, we can, first of all, I think, the whole icebreaker thing is really important. With a student, you have to get to know them. You have to help students get to know each other. You have to be able to understand, who they are. What are they interested in? What are their goals? What kind of artist do they want to be? What kind of work do they want to do in the arts industries? Sometimes, if you don't want the conversation to be too personal right away, have you experienced racism, is a huge question to ask your students. But asking the kind of question of, what are the kinds of racial, gender stereotypes do you see in the media? What stereotypes do you see about class? What stereotypes do you see about older people, older women? Those kinds of questions are just ever so slightly depersonalized, and can lay the foundation for a student to think, actually, I can talk about this, and maybe then get a bit closer to talking about, talking about how it affects their own life. I do think that even tutors need to start thinking about, if they're using prompts in the classroom or studio, can they use prompts from a wider range of authors, artists, techniques? Can they use prompts where they themselves can then see, you put your 10 artists in front of you, and you think, okay, I've got only one black artist in this, like, that seems a bit tokenistic. Can I change that? Can I bring more diversity into my list of artists that I'm teaching this term or this year? So I think it's really good to think about the prompts you're using, and can you make them visual for yourself and your students, so that then you think, okay, actually, I can interrogate, the prompts that I'm using. So say that you started with prompts to do with the media or the arts industries. You can start to make things a bit more personal and say things like, in a work situation, have you ever been in a work situation where you felt that something about your appearance, was misunderstood? And you can give the example of hair color, tattoos, all of the rest of it, so that students know that again, that things like, things are getting closer to being a bit more personal. So I think there are loads of prompts that tutors can use that are a bit safer, that feel a bit less threatening or a bit less sensitive, and then move closer to the more sensitive question when students feel like the space is safe enough. Obviously, we know this as tutors, that once we have created a safe space, that doesn't mean that it's a safe space for everyone. So we can't again assume that, oh well, why aren't you talking when I'm asking this question? You have an experience of racism. You don't want to finger point. This is very important for tutors to understand, that no matter how safe a space you'll create doesn't mean that everyone will want to talk about sensitive issues. So I think it's kind of, again, creating the space, asking the questions, giving the prompts, but then understanding that the student still has the choice of whether they want to speak about something, or if they don't, and if they want to leave that out of their work and curriculum. So, one of the things I often think about as tutors, especially in schools, it's really important for us not to assume that we know the identity of a student. A student has the agency, has the right to say, to decide what part of their identity should come into the curriculum, should come into the artistic projects. So, for example, one of our students from China, one of the things she said once was, "I don't like the question, where are you from? I don't like being asked that. It's so othering. It feels very alienating, and it suggests that you are not from here, right?" But actually, our students, instead of finger pointing, instead of us saying, "Oh, but you're from that place, so you should know about that place, and you're from this other place, and so that's your heritage," we should not make assumptions about where we think students are from. We also shouldn't make the assumption that they want to study that place, that they're meant to be from, or that that's what they want to bring to their art. We should really let the student decide, what part of the world, what part of themselves they want to see in their work. I think one of the important things is to kind of give the student the agency, instead of kind of going, you from there and you from there. Try not to kind of other our students by imposing our own view of what culture looks like.